talk about the way power is used in peace negotiations, but also in any context in which any of us move, from the very interpersonal in the home to behaviour in organisations, places of employment, to behaviour on the streets, to even the more rarefied atmosphere of international relations. And what I'm going to argue is that there's no secret that I've been involved in peace negotiations in the Middle East, in Cambodia, in different parts of Africa. And believe me, the way in which you use power effectively is no different from the way you treat your lovers and friends in the home or in other personal contexts. I want to run through this question about the exercise of power, and I'll come to the second point that I want to make, which is about peace with justice. I'm only vaguely interested in peace. I'm 1,000 times more interested in peace with justice. With regard to the exercise of power, most of us are the victims, or not the beneficiaries, of one-dimensional ways of people throwing their weight around. That's been going on, women know this better than men, it's been going on for centuries. The top-down imposition of rules, the passing of new forms of anti-terrorist legislation, the attempt to suppress freedom of speech, the argument to women in the 1930s that they should wait a bit longer for universal suffrage and so on. It's a kind of top-down version of the way people use power. When I first came to Sydney University about 30 years ago, I did a large survey of students, getting them to identify what was the most disempowering experience they'd ever had. And the biggest return came from young males. About 38% of the sample said that their experience of Catholic schools had been by far the most disempowering experience, and they were still suffering from it. This was long before the controversy over the abuse of children by different religious institutions. So that, when you think about the hierarchies associated with finance, with religion, with the military, with penal systems, you know how much the people love the imposition of power from the top down. And I've watched that more specifically in dealing with appalling bureaucrats at places, at informed places like Sydney University, but I've also watched it closely when dealing with psychopaths in Africa and the Middle East. This top-down version of throwing your weight around, you can see it if you go often to the federal parliament and watch people argue with their elbows. It's popular because it's easy. Let's move along and continue to what I call the two-dimensional exercise of power. The two-dimensional is what we're told by the Australian media every night, that this is a pluralist, this is a democratic society, it's pluralist, it's tolerant, it's full of mateship, except for people we don't like or don't look like us. But it gets justified by the establishment, by the media, day in and day out. It's two-dimensional. We include women as well as men. We allow patients to have a say in hospitals as well as doctors. We even listen to students' point of view, even over deregulation, even if we don't take any notice of them. It's two-dimensional. It's power exercised only within the rules already set, within the constraints and boundaries. People have been conned into thinking that is enough. This is the best country in the world. You see the flags unfurled on Australia Day. There's a huge symbolism industry that goes into justifying that. Let me tell you, in fact I don't need to tell anybody in this audience, if that's the limitation of the way you can think about the creative exercise of power, then you won't get very... In a way, what I'm suggesting that this is an intellectual, spiritual, creative, political struggle for all of us till the day we die, is to think of the creative use of power, what I would call multi-dimensional ways of going beyond the boundaries that we've just talked about. Let me give you, it's essentially about the use of power that is only fulfilling for everyone and harms no one. But there have to be much more imaginative ways in which we can do this, and in a way the summary by your three colleagues on this panel 20 minutes ago, tried to address that. I've actually just come from the demo outside Abbott's office over retaining Medicare and challenging the business of the co-payment. But I have to say, when I listen to some of the arguments, particularly by the Labour Party, that they don't think sufficiently creatively about the way to justify the retention of universal healthcare in this country. If only they would talk in a creative way about the exercise of power over universal health insurance, then a wider public would be 10 times more enthusiastic. If they were to say that we believe strongly that nobody should be financially penalised for being sick as a basis of a civil society, then we will be talking about, if you like, a form of peace with justice. It's not good just saying, well, you know, we've always had Medicare, it's the best system in the world, and we don't want to pay it, and we don't want to have it eroded. That's fine. But it's that kind of visionary appeal that triggers the emotional response that I think it was Adam who said, or Jim or somebody said, we won't win these arguments only with reason. Let me come to the second point, which is the last one, which is about the formula of peace with justice. Peace is really only about, have you stopped beating your wife? Have we stopped Hamas firing rockets? That's a bad example because in my view they're entitled to fire rockets. I hope the members of the Jewish Board of Deputies are here to record that observation. I mean, the best example of that, of the notion being sceptical about peace, is the Treaty of Versailles. There was plenty of peace, but there was no peace with there was no justice. There was no intent. There was only a concern to punish the people who lost. And all that did was guarantee that the Second World War, a little more than 20 years later. So the formula for peace with justice crosses every kind of boundary you can think of. It's about universal human rights. It's about the language and philosophy and practice of non-violence. And it's about the notion of a common humanity. It's not about border protection. It's about the notion that Ebola doesn't respect anybody's boundaries, and neither will nuclear weapons. So that you don't have to repeat John's poem, No man or woman is an island, to know about that interdependence. So that's the agenda. Universal human rights, all 30 clauses, basically quite simple to understand, yet most people who graduate from universities have never read the most famous document of the 20th century. It's got two essential ideas which all the peace negotiations I've been involved in revolve around those ideas. Freedom from oppression, freedom from poverty, freedom from sickness, and then the other side of the coin, the freedom to achieve the kind of fulfillment that only leads to an enhanced existence. Last comment I'd make about peace, for example, in Gaza right at this moment. I mean, the long term, which should happen tomorrow, is to stop the siege and to cease the occupation overnight. But more immediately, people need water, they need electricity, they need medical care. We have the first ever student from Gaza in Sydney at the moment doing a postgraduate course at Sydney University.
Wow.
The first person ever, took us about 4 months to get him out. That's a story in itself. But he will tell you, in terms of peace with justice, that he's quite pleased that his parents' home is still upright. But they now have 50 people living in it. And there is no water, and there is no electricity, and there's hardly any food. So if you don't pay attention to those issues, then a peace settlement is of little consequence. And the worst form of violence is for an academic to talk too much.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Stuart.